Hi, you are watching the satellite communication lecture series. In this video, we are going to see about the rain-induced attenuation and interference. Rain attenuation is a function of the rain rate. By rain rate mean the rate at which the rainwater would accumulate in a rain gauge situated at the ground in the region of interest. So in calculations relating to radio wave attenuation, the rain rate is measured in millimeters per hour. So of interest is the percentage of time that specified values are exceeded. The time percentage is usually that of a year. For example, a rain rate of 0.001% means that the rain rate would be exceeded for 0.001% of a year, or about 5.3 minutes during any 1 year. In this case, rain rate would be denoted by R 0.001. Right. In general, the percentage time is denoted by P and the rain rate is denoted by RP. The specific attenuation alpha is written as alpha is equal to A into RP per B, where A and B depend on frequency and polarization. Values of A and B are available, and for the values will be used. The values of H and V refer to the horizontal and vertical polarization respectively. Once the specific attenuation is found, the total attenuation is determined as capital A is equal to alpha into L dB, where L is the effective path length of the signal through the rain. Because the rain density is unlikely to be uniform over the actual path length, and then effective path length must be used rather than the actual length. So this diagram shows the geometry of this situation. The geometric or slant path length is shown as LS, and this depends on the antenna angle of elevation theta and the rain height HR, which is the height at which the freezing occurs. So this diagram shows the curves for HR for different climatic zones. So in this diagram, that is three methods are labeled. Method 1 is maritime climates, and method 2 is tropical climates, and method 3 is continental climates. For the last, the curves shown for p values of 0.001, 0.01 and 0.1 and 1%. For small angle of elevation, that is EL less than 10 degree, the determination of LS is complicated by earth curvature. However, and if you take the values of EL greater than 10 degree, a flat earth approximation can be used, and it is seen that LS is equal to HR minus H naught divided by sin EL. The effective path length is given in terms of slant length, that is L is equal to LS into RP, and RP is the reduction factor, which is a function of the percentage time P and LG. The horizontal projection of LS is the L denoted by LG, and from this the horizontal projection is seen to be LG is equal to LS into cos EL. That is from, you can derive from this diagram. And now with all these factors together into one equation, the rain attenuation in decibels is given by AP is equal to A into RPB into LS into RP in dB. The interpolation formulas which depend on the climatic zone being considered are available for values of P other than those quoted earlier. That is, polarization shift resulting from rain will be seen now. So now let us move on to effects of rain. In the C band, the more especially the KU band, rainfall is the most significant cause of the signal fading. The rainfall results in attenuation of radio waves by scattering and by absorption of the energy from the wave. The rain attenuation increases with increasing frequency and is worse in the KU band compared with the C band. The rain attenuation for horizontal polarization is considerably greater than vertical polarization. Rain attenuation data are usually available in the form of curves or tables showing the fraction of time that a given attenuation is exceeded, or equivalently, the probability that a given attenuation will be exceeded. Rain attenuation is accompanied by noise generators, and both the attenuation and the noise adversely affect the satellite circuit performance. As a result of falling through the atmosphere, raindrops are somewhat flattened in shape, becoming elliptical rather than spherical. When a radio wave with some arbitrary polarization passes through the raindrops, the component of electrical field in the direction of the major axis of the raindrops will be affected differently from the component along the minor axis. So this produces the depolarization of the wave, and in effect, the wave becomes elliptically polarized. This is true for both linear and circular polarizations, and the effect seems to be much worse for circular polarization. Where only a single polarization is involved, the effect is not serious, but where frequency reuse is achieved through the use of the orthogonal polarization and depolarizing devices which compensate for the rain depolarization may have to be installed. The earth station antenna is operated under a cover of radome. The effect of rain on the radome must be taken into account. You can see a radome in this figure. So, the rain falling on a hemispherical radome forms a water layer of constant thickness, and such a layer introduces losses both by absorption and by reflection. So, results show an attenuation of about 14 dB for a 1 mm thick water layer. It is desirable, therefore, that earth station antennas be operated without radomes wherever possible. So, without a radome, water will gather on the antenna reflector, but the attenuation produced by this is much less serious than that produced by the wet rod. Now, let us move on to uplink rain-fed margin. Rainfall results in the attenuation of the signal and increase in noise temperature, degrading the C by N naught of the satellite in two ways. One is the increase in noise, however, it is not usually a major factor for the uplink. This is so because the satellite antenna is pointed toward a hot earth, and this added to the satellite receiver noise temperature tends to mask any additional noise induced by attenuation. The uplink carrier power at the satellite must be held within the closed limits for certain modes of operation, and some form of uplink power control is necessary to compensate for rain fades. The power output from the satellite may be monitored by a central control stations, or in some cases by each earth station, and the power output from any given earth station may be increased if required to compensate for fading. Thus, the earth station HPA must have sufficient reserve power to meet the fade margin requirement. And now let us see about the downlink rain-fed margin. Rainfall introduces attenuation by absorption and scattering of signal energy, and the absorptive attenuation introduces noise. Let A represents the rain attenuation caused by absorption. The corresponding power loss ratio A is given by A is equal to 10 log of modulus of A divided by 10, and substituting this for L in equation of T and W comma I, which gives the effective noise temperature of the rain as T and W comma I is equal to T naught into 1 minus 1 by A. TA is the apparent absorber temperature. TA depends on the physical temperature of the rain and the scattering effect of the rain cell on the thermal noise incident upon it. The value of the apparent absorber temperature lies between 270 and 290 Kelvin. The total sky temperature is the clear sky temperature TCS plus the rain temperature. Therefore, T sky is equal to TCS plus T rain. Rainfall therefore degrades the received C by N naught in two ways: by attenuating the carrier wave and by increasing the sky noise temperature. The rain power attenuation A is entirely absorptive. The downlink C by N ratio power ratio is related to the clear sky value by N by C of sky is equal to N by C of CS, that is clear sky, into A plus A minus 1 into TS by TSCS, where A is the rain power attenuation and CS is the clear sky conditions and TSCS is the system noise temperature under clear conditions. Note that the noise to carrier ratios rather than the carrier to noise ratios are required. For lower frequencies, that is for 6 to 4 GHz and low rainfall rates below 1 mm per hour, the rain attenuation is almost entirely absorptive. At higher rainfall rates and at the higher frequencies, scattering becomes significant. When scattering and absorption are both significant, the total attenuation must be used to calculate the reduction in carrier power and the absorptive attenuation to calculate the increase in noise temperature. A minimum value of C by N is required for the satisfactory reception. In the case of frequency modulation, the minimum value is set by the threshold level of the FM detector, and the threshold margin is normally allowed. Sufficient margin must be allowed so that the rain-induced fades do not take C by N below threshold more than a specified percentage of the time. Now let us move on to the interference. And you can see the possible interference path that passes in this diagram. So, the possible modes of interference are, first one is A1, that is the terrestrial station transmissions causing interference to reception by an earth station. And A2 is the earth station transmission causing interference to reception by a terrestrial station. And B1 is the space station transmission of one space system causing interference to reception by an earth station of another space system. And B2 is the earth station transmission of one space system causing interference to reception by a space station of another space system. So that is given in this diagram. So C1 is the space station transmission causing interference to reception by a terrestrial station. And C2 is the terrestrial station transmission causing interference to reception by space station. And E is the space station transmission of one space system causing interference to reception by a space station of another space system, where F is the earth station transmission of one space system causing interference to reception by an earth station of another space system. Here, A1, A2, C1 and C2 are the possible modes of interference between space and terrestrial services. B1 and B2 are the possible modes of interference between the stations of different space systems using separate uplink and downlink frequency bands. And E and F are the extensions to B1 and B2 where bidirectional frequency bands are used. The radio regulations specify the maximum limits on radiated powers to reduce the potential interference to acceptable level in most situations. However, the interference may still occur in certain cases, and coordination between the telecommunication administrations that are affected is then required. Coordination may require both administrations to change or adjust some of the technical parameters of their systems. For geostationary satellites, interference modes B1 and B2 set a lower limit to the orbital spacing between the satellites. To increase the capacity of the geostationary orbit, the Federal Communication FCC in the United States has in recent years authorized a reduction in the orbital spacing from 4 inches to 2 inches in the 6.4 GHz band. So, radio regulations place limits on energy spectral density which may be emitted by an earth station. Energy dispersal is one technique employed to redistribute the transmitted energy more evenly over the transmitted bandwidth. Now let us see the interference between the satellite circuits, that is in B1 and B2 modes. A satellite circuit may suffer the B1 and B2 modes of the interference, and this from the number of neighboring satellite circuits and the resultant effect being termed as aggregate interference. Single entry interference refers to the interference produced by the single interfering circuit on a neighboring circuit, and system performance is determined by the ratio of the wanted to interfering powers, and in this case the wanted carrier to the interfering carrier power or C by I ratio. The single most important factor controlling interference is the radiation pattern of the earth station antenna. Comparatively, large diameter reflectors can be used with earth station antennas, and hence narrow beamwidths can be achieved. For example, a 10 meter antenna at 14 GHz has a 3 dB beamwidth of about 0.15 degree. This is very much narrower than 2 degree to 4 degree orbital spacing allocated to satellites. So this figure shows the angle subtended by two satellites in the geostationary orbit. The orbital separation is defined as the angle subtended at the center of Earth, known as the geocentric angle. So this is shown clearly in this diagram. However, from an earth station at point P, the satellites would appear to subtend at an angle beta. Angle beta is referred to as topocentric angle. In all practical situations relating to the satellite interference, the topocentric and geocentric angles may be assumed equal. Consider now S1 as the wanted satellite and S2 as the interfering satellite. And an antenna at P will have the main beam directed at S1 and off-axis component at angle theta directed as S2. Angle theta is the same as the topocentric angle, which is already shown, may be assumed to equal to the geocentric or orbital spacing angle. Orbital spacing angles range from 2 degree to 4 degree in 0.5 intervals in the C-band. The satellite circuit being interfered from the Earth station A via satellite S1 to the receiving station B. B1 mode of interference can occur from satellite S2 into Earth station B, and B2 mode of interference can occur from Earth station C into satellite S1. The total single entry interference is the combined effect of these two modes. So this is shown in this diagram. This is the 3 dB footprint contour for S1, and this one is the 3 dB footprint contour for S2. So the two satellites are spaced with a spacing of theta. Okay. Because the satellites cannot carry very large antenna reflectors, the beam width is relatively wide even for the so-called spot beams. For example, a 3.5 meter antenna at 12 GHz has a beam width of about 0.5 degree, and the equatorial arc subtended by this angle is 314 kilometers. In interference calculations, therefore, the Earth stations will be assumed to be situated on the 3 dB contours of the satellite footprints, in which case the satellite antennas do not provide any gain discrimination between the wanted and the interfering carriers on either transmit or receive. Thank you.